on revolutionizing finance for a sustainable future. I'd just like to introduce the moderator. He's the editor at IntelliNews, Daniel Kazenibrad, and he'll take it away and introduce the panelists. So over to you, Daniel.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And thanks everybody for joining us today. Welcome and thank you for joining us today at FFCON23. We're gathered here today to discuss a topic that is not only timely, but also critical to the future of our global economy and environment. Revolutionizing finance for a sustainable future is this roundtable discussion. As we continue to face unprecedented challenges related to climate change, social inequality, and economic instability, it is crucial that we explore innovative financial solutions that can help drive sustainable growth and long-lasting positive change for society and the environment. Today, we have the privilege of hosting a distinguished panel of experts from various sectors in the financial industry. These leaders will share their insights, experiences, and a vision for a world where finance plays a transformative role in addressing these global challenges. Throughout our discussion, we will delve into both general trends and specific initiatives undertaken by our panelists' respective organizations, and we hope that this conversation will not only provide valuable insights, but also spark further thought and collaboration among all those who are committed to creating a more sustainable and equitable future. Once again, thank you for your presence and participation. We look forward to an engaging and inspiring conversation. Let's welcome our esteemed panelists and begin our discussion. We've got Natasha Ingram, CMO at Blue Sphere Carbon, Marty Seymour, CEO of Carbon RX, and Jana McDonald, a CDO of Obsidian Engineering and founder and CEO of Guardian Conservation Corp. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, great to be here.
So we're going to run through a few questions, but first of all, I wanted you guys to just introduce yourselves one by one and for our viewers and listeners, and to tell us what you're doing currently and which companies you're with. Natasha, do you want to start?
Sure, yes. I am Natasha. I'm the CMO for Blue Sphere Carbon. So our business has several facets. Primarily, we have built an exchange for carbon credits. It's called the BCX. It's open to all types of investors and companies, and essentially it streamlines the process of buying and selling carbon credits. We have partnered with PureSky, so a credit rating agency that's controlled by a DAO of investors, and it's directed through a weighted vote to help ensure the quality of the credits that we're listing on our exchange. We are also working on a partnership with the royal family in Malaysia, planting trees on 70,000 acres of land and developing numerous projects to earn carbon credits. And lastly, it's still in development, but we have a really exciting new partnership. It includes bringing forward new technologies in AI to help count trees and verify the impact of the projects we're working on. So we know there's not always a lot of good faith in many of the projects listed, and this new endeavor, it will be the ultimate way of creating transparency amongst those projects.
That is really interesting and it's quite creative what you're doing over there. Jana, do you want to go next?
Absolutely, sure. My name is Jana. I am the CEO of Guardian Conservation and CDO of Obsidian Engineering. That's a really beautiful relationship between an EPC and a carbon credit project developer. So in the case of Guardian, we work with clients from conception through to commercialization of their carbon credit development. It includes everything from financing, engineering support, becoming bankable, PR support, recommendations, and then registering, executing projects, and then monetizing them at the end. So we're able to support our clients through working with parties like Natasha and with engaging with registries like Marty. And yeah, really pleased to be here and to be able to kind of explore this panel together.
I think it's a good segue over to Marty.
Yeah, well, nice hand up, Jana. Very smooth. So I'm the CEO of a company called Carbon RX, and we're located in the prairies in Western Canada in a city called Regina. And we specialize in helping landowners originate carbon. And our core business lines would be indigenous and regenerative agriculture, carbon credits. And we're a full service, in many ways, Jana and I's businesses intersect in terms of the heavy lifting that's needed to help demonstrate and prove how much carbon's there. And our company continues on to help our clients market their carbon credits as well. And I've collided with both Jana and Natasha in the past on the desire to improve how carbon credits are adjudicated and creating a standard that actually elevates the whole regenerative movement so that there's high quality carbon credits on the market. So I think the rest of it we're going to get into in the chat, Daniel.
Microphone back on there. So we'll start off with a really easy question for you guys. So what are the key differences between regenerative finance, impact finance, carbon offsets, and how do they contribute to sustainability in their own unique ways? So that goes out to the group. Who wants to start?
I can take that one.
Go for it, Natasha.
So regenerative finance, so it's a relatively new approach to finance. It seeks to regenerate the ecosystems and support sustainable communities to create a financial system that aligns with the principles of regenerative agriculture and supports the natural ecosystems. So this is more of importance of like a local community-based solutions. Impact finance, it refers to financial investments that seek to have a positive social or environmental impact while generating returns. So this usually means investing in companies or projects that have a mission that you're aligned with to create sustainable change.
Natasha, I'll pick up on your comment on impact investing, because it actually speaks to a core part of our business, Daniel, is we work with First Nations or Indigenous groups in Canada, specifically to help them demonstrate and prove how much carbon they're capturing on their lands. And if you know anything about carbon, land is really the anchor asset in the whole thing. You can reduce emissions. Jana's team has great expertise in helping companies do that. But the most natural path would be to do it through land. And so impact investing and helping Indigenous people use their forests and their farms to capture land is a core strategy we employ, which really speaks to this growing emerging interest in ESG investing and impact financing.
Jana, anything to add on that one?
I mean, Marty, thanks for the love. Absolutely. Yeah. Marty's right. It's a really interesting kind of duality between the ability to use the land that we have, and then also the industry or the tech side, where we're trying to access the pores and utilize as much enhanced oil recovery as we can, while mitigating as much emission as possible, and identifying the proper routes of funding and to have the greatest funding impact while having the least amount of climate impact.
I think it's an interesting point. Marty was just saying a second ago about the connecting with the First Nation people. Have you seen that done anywhere else around the world with Native communities?
Yeah, and actually, I did some work months ago when I first started this, Daniel, that I'd read at one point 2/3 of the earth is managed or influenced by Indigenous ownership. And so if you think about scalability, so in Canada, where our core business is, there's over 600 First Nations communities, which means there's 600 landholders that can actively participate in a regenerative practice of some kind. Well, that scales easily into the US, where the land holding structure is similar, Australia, the Aborigine, and then all the first carbon projects we saw in forestry in Amazon. I have some work in Peru. It's all Indigenous items. And it speaks to if you occupy the land, you become a significant influencer in the space. And then most Indigenous communities don't have the technical depth or strength to take this on. And so they're actually reaching out saying, we do anything to preserve the planet and make our communities better. We see a little help. And so it's actually been a fast emerging area of carbon practices.
And I suppose the rural stewardship plays into that wider thing. I mean, what we're looking in this sector is for the creation of, stewards looking after our land, aren't we? So, and I think if you can already find those people living on that land and who have historically taken care of it, that you're already one step ahead there, aren't you?
Well, and we often will use the quote that Indigenous people were the original environmentalists. And so nobody has more passion around environmental stewardship. And the second group in that space would be farmers. It's my neighbors where I grew up that have the same care and commitment to soil management that you'd see from Indigenous people. Indigenous people were just years and years ahead of us, started down this path.
Okay, that's fascinating. Next question. What are the major differences between developments in different locations and jurisdictions for implementation of carbon credits, offsets, and impact finance? So we're looking at this one on an international level. So how do your organizations interact in an international sense?
I'll start with this one. The breadth of regulatory and the breadth of jurisdictions globally when it comes to carbon credit development, registration, monetization is so massive. And so I find that we see a lot of collaboration, and then we also see a lot of kind of butting heads when it comes to what is the impact and what's the driver forward. Guardian works globally, and we have the ability to kind of weave in and out of multiple registries and networks and markets. And like I say, what comes with that is an incredible amount of collaboration and different perspectives. But what also comes is almost a comparison of who's doing it better and who can be kind of who's the lowest hanging fruit for criticism is one of the things that I find that comes with the multiple different markets. And so I think probably this is another really good point to kind of send it back to Marty and talk about the Pure Sky registry that Guardian is involved in as well. And that is by identifying a way to kind of to provide transparency to all of the carbon credits and all of the emission reductions and to create value for them, because there's so many areas of opportunity within the different geological registries and jurisdictions where emission reductions are being executed. Emissions are being avoided or reduced, but cannot be monetized because of some of the political nuances or the parameters put in place by different registries. And so having a vote-based, having a DAO-based registry that allows society as kind of a global market to decide what is an emission reduction and where do we want sustainability. I think that's kind of I am going to lob it over to Marty to say, kind of wrap this up for me to speak about.
Well, I will. And Natasha, I'm going to warn you, I'm going to lob it your way and eventually here, Natasha. But I want to build off of Jana setting the stage about internationally when we look at trading carbon credits. So in our core business, trying to make some trades, there's some inherent conflicts in the trades themselves and jurisdictional differences. To your question, Daniel, is different countries around the world recognizing credits differently, mostly from a taxation standpoint. But in the voluntary space, then the conversation really comes around the methodology and the confidence that the lead up in the work is legitimate, that those credits are high quality. Because I think what you're going to see in emergence in the carbon credit space is differing projects being rated differently in terms of their quality. And I'm a firm believer that there's a carbon credit out there for every type of buyer, and there's a carbon credit opportunity for every type of originator, the person that has the technology to do it. So Natasha and I's organizations actually co-founded a DAO-based registry called Pure Sky to try to address what Jana had threw our way about sort of this conflict that arises within registries. And I've been a huge advocate of decentralizing control of carbon credit approvals, and mostly because the industry could use velocity. There's a desired need to be able to approve projects faster. As an originator myself, is one of the barriers to advancing management practice or a technology implication is a 2 or 3 year wait list to have your project approved. And so if you truly believe in making society better, you need to move at the speed of business on approving projects, because that will allow iterative improvements and enhancements on the behavior. And Natasha, maybe I'll let you talk about sort of the DAO in terms of Pure Sky, in terms of how the decentralization kind of is set up or structured. Maybe just talk about puresky.earth for a second.
Yeah, I think that's, can I just interject? Natasha, if you could try and give everybody an overview of what Pure Sky is aiming to do, I think that would, help everybody.
Yeah, so I mean, Pure Sky is a registry for carbon credit projects. And the carbon credit market, obviously, it's fairly new, and we know that business typically moves a lot faster than governments and regulations. So there's a lot of noise in the space, and the biggest issue that we're facing with this system is transparency and trust. So people need to feel like the projects that they're investing in are actually going to make a positive impact. So like Marty mentioned, Pure Sky is a DAO, so it's the investors in the company that are going to approve the projects. So they're going to all be they're all going to be well vetted projects before they're listed on the Blue Spear Carbon Exchange.
Natasha, if I can just pick up just right where you left off there, and also comment on the fact that there is one kind of greenhouse gas standard, and that is the ISO 14064. And when we talk about having a DAO-based registry where the investors are the ones who approve the projects, just to be incredibly clear and just even kind of hammer home that transparency, that as long as the emissions are quantified and calculated based on that ISO greenhouse gas standard, and as long as we have individuals and parties who are verified to make those calculations and to create those equations and to approve those methodologies, then the sake of the registry should be to list out that transparency, just to provide it. It shouldn't be, and I think I know that this has been a pain point for all three of us on this panel. And when you speak about the registries and the ones that we are all the most familiar with, they really have paved the way for us to be able to have the market access and the knowledge that we have today. However, the fact is that with these queues of years before you can get your project even in front of a potential consumer, emission reductions won't take place. Because if you have a project developer that either is going to implement a carbon capture entity, or they're going to do something else instead with that capital. And if they can't get access to their capital for the emission reductions because they can't get their projects registered, then they're not going to go through that emission reduction process, right? That's additionality in its entirety, is having a carbon credit market that pushes the market towards those carbon credits because of the intrinsic emission reductions associated to them. So having I know we're all just plugging the registry now, and not on purpose, but I think it's because we all really believe in this, that there has to be something in place that allows for organizations and corporations to profit from their emission reductions, because that's the incentivization. That's the whole market right there.
Well, that's lovely, because that leads on to my next question. What are the latest trends and developments in the impact investing and in this sector? Where do you see it going?
Well, I can speak to it from an agriculture standpoint, because I always describe myself as the farm kid. And, just 2 weeks ago in San Francisco at the World Ag Tech Forum, is what you see is an emergence of technology application. So in Jana's wheelhouse, where they're doing, I call it industrial carbon, because it's a sophisticated, well-measured, well-metered industry that has actually done meaningful things to reduce carbon. In the nature-based emergent issue, especially in agriculture, we have a lot of trouble measuring, because we're just in the early days of initiating technology to do the measuring. So quantifying carbon at a soil level is complicated, it's expensive, and slow. I'm inspired by the application remote sensing, Daniel, and I've been really, really prosecuting using satellite technology to measure and manage soil carbon to track changes over time. What it does is it creates scalability for the sector. So we're no longer driving around with trucks measuring soil, using carbon to measure carbon. And now we're using remote sensing. And so that part of the carbon economy is emerging. It's new, but it's being adapted. For the mining industry has been using satellites for years with LiDAR. Forestry's been playing around with it for a few years. So when I think refi and the attracting of investment is attracting money to either projects, the kind of the old-fashioned easy way to build and do something better, but also the technology side of it. And I think it's why you see the big VC funds growing with climate investment strategies to finance some of these technology plays.
Actually, we're going to meander off the original question sets now. So you're talking about agri-tech, and obviously it's something that I've been writing and researching on for a long while. Do you think it's difficult to get non-natives into this sector? So, I mean, as in non-refi natives into the sector, because that's one of the hardest things that a lot of people tell me. I was on meetings earlier today about the same thing, and they were saying very difficult to onboard agriculturalists, landowners, and onto the sector, even though they could, play a significant part in the development of this sector?
It is hard. We see the emergence of some VC funds in Western Canada that are creating an ecosystem of investing and attracting finance. And there's a few antibodies in the system, Daniel, that makes it hard for outsiders to come in. One is agriculture is a very technical business. It's not red barns and pitchforks and pigs, cows, chickens all at one farm anymore. These are sophisticated, progressive, data-strong enterprises. So if you don't understand data and the language, it's super hard to land in there with your solution to help a farmer do better. It's just you're speaking different languages. So that's one of the early barriers to entry. And then the other one that I've learned is iterative improvements of tech. So in consumer goods like smartphones, you could iterate your app and your technology on a weekly basis and make it better. In agriculture, we grow one crop a year. In 10 years, you've allowed yourself 10 iterations if the climate and all of the weather around it can stay the same. So there's some natural barriers to entry. And my advice to those wanting to enter the space, partner with somebody that's from the industry to accelerate your integration.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Natasha, what do you think about trying to onboard new clients?
Sorry, what do I think about for onboarding new clients for Blue Spear or for Pure Sky?
Well, for the sector in general, but also your company, yeah.
So we're mainly, working with retail investors, and the main thing that we're trying to do right now is really just grow that brand awareness and have people understand, what the carbon markets are. I think the term carbon credits, it gets lobbed around a lot and people have heard the term, but just having them actually understand where the investment opportunity lies and how you can actually make money in this space, and just getting, more awareness out there.
Gianna, how do you feel like onboarding new people into the sector?
I think Marty made a great point by comparing. I because my background is in the oil and energy sector, I often compare, funding for a pipeline or a gas plant as compared to funding for an RNG project. But taking in, the iPhone or the tech or the egg kind of component is really interesting. And so I started bouncing my head and really thinking about it. But I'm going to quote my dad and say that typically the price is easy if the picture is clear. And so one of the most interesting things that I find about meeting with investors or meeting with individuals that call themselves inventors when it comes to that emission reduction tech is all the multiple areas of revenue and all the different profit centers that can be associated to your emission reduction project. When I think about, and forgive me if I get kind of too industrial, I think it's funny when the farm boy calls me sophisticated. That's but when I think about, a cogen or a power plant, and the funding associated to that, my brain immediately goes to, okay, so we have the power purchasing agreement, we have the emission attribute, or we have the carbon credit, the emission commodity, all the different terms or jargon, Natasha, that people use to list the same phrase. You have so let's do it again. We have the PPA, we have the carbon credit associated to it. We have likely additional offtakes. We have just all these different areas where I find that if you're not prioritizing emission reduction investment, there's so much money being left on the table. And another thing that we find ourselves doing a lot of the time is creating ICAPs. And it's every investor that we work with has a certain percentage of their book or of their yearly spend that has to go towards these emission reduction projects. And just kind of commenting on Marty's statement before, that when you can align what you're doing, and actually this is interesting because the keynote mentioned this as well, the priority of society and the priority of it seems like the human is moving towards something that is completely impact driven. So if you are developing a helium facility, you are going to not just develop the refinery and find an off-taker, but you're going to identify if you can have positive impact on the First Nations in your community or the bands around, where your land asset is. You're going to identify if the land that you're on has any pore space or any ability to sequester carbon. You're going to invest in waste heat recovery and in, potentially any water treatment and in carbon capture and in scrubbing and all of these things that can become incredibly complicated and expensive, but every single thing that you kind of put into the puzzle or put into the picture creates greater positive impact. And that is where I'm seeing in my personal network, that's where I'm seeing all of the investment going. It is not just about, the bottom line by any means anymore. It is about having the greatest profit, the greatest, the greatest impact, the greatest net positive impact, and as many communities as you can possibly encompass within your project. So if the question, and I know I'm kind of long wording this, but if the question is, are you finding that it's difficult to kind of onboard new parties or new organizations or new companies? Certainly, Marty's correct that it depends who you kind of circle yourself with, but there are individuals in this space that are miles ahead of us and who are really leading the way and who are so incredibly collaborative that it's almost like there's no room for competition in this space because there's too much to learn, too much to know, too many people to collaborate with, too many project ideas, too many investors to try and kind of corner the market. We have the ability to, as a global community, have serious, actual, quantifiable impact through the projects that we're doing or executing, and the investors want to be part of that, or at least the ones that we seem to find in our network. So positive.
Okay, so that leads me on to the next question. How can the transition to a low carbon economy be supported and accelerated through your projects? Marty, do you want to start off with that one?
Yeah. How can I be? I'm going to say, I think for me, there's a few things. I wanted to build up Jana's last point, so my head's still stuck back there. So I'm going to
go for it. Yeah.
I'm going to sort of answer your question, but I'm going to answer it in my own way.
Yeah, go.
I think one of the emerging challenges in this sector is that we don't cheer for each other enough. And what I mean by that is the carbon economy, as much as it's 20 years old, is not. It's 3 or 4 years of real momentum. This is a snowball rolling down the hill. And every time there's a bad article posted in the Guardian or pick a story, it actually takes us back. It now creates barriers of entry to people. They're afraid, there's risks, the greenwashing story, all of the narrative that gets in the way of attracting new investment for fear. And I think the cancel culture that's crept into the carbon credit trading space is actually a detriment.
And why do you think of that? Why do you think that's crept in there? Is it leaked from another sector, do you think?
I don't know about that, Daniel. I'm the furthest thing from a conspiracy theorist, and I'm not even saying that some of the statements aren't founded. Actually, the point of my comment is that as an industry, I'm not cheering against my competitors. I want them to be successful. I find every community and every farmer I meet, that First Nation or farmer, wherever they are, they don't understand the carbon economy. It's much why this whole webinar is put in place. And so the last thing I need them to do is create doubt and fear to participate. And so each time there's a negative story, I introduce fear. And that to me is not how you advance a greener society. And so I'm everywhere I can. I just think a rising tide raises all boats. So let's make sure Jana's successful and Natasha's successful and Daniel's successful. There's enough business here for everybody. And attraction of finance into this space is the way to oil the transition so that all of our clients can implement more change to make the carbon reduction faster. But it doesn't work on the heels of cheering against somebody who had a bad day in the news, founded or unfounded.
Yeah.
On that topic, do you think that it's the mainstream press, and I use that in very loose quotation, but do you think the press doesn't quite understand the long-term prospects for this sector? Do you think that's why, for example, the Guardian newspaper writes a damning article, or Bloomberg does one, and because there hasn't been a lot of good press in the past few weeks and months, I've noticed, and obviously it's detrimental, but this is not just a profit-making exercise. This is, for the future, for the children, for everybody, who lives on this pale blue dot. So do you think there are ways that the industry can better educate the general population about how it is developing and why it's needed?
Well, to speak to Pure Sky, and Natasha, hopefully I didn't steal your idea, but if you think about the principle of a DAO-based registry, so owned by the people, democratically supported by the people, it's self-policing. Is that an effective DAO has a diversity of ownership and says, okay, this carbon project passes the smell test for all of the members, and all the members won't be aligned on every project. That's not the point of the DAO. It's the general will and the progress improvement that I think the DAO stands for in terms of Pure Sky. So I don't think the media set out in the morning to make somebody have a bad day. I don't think that's the point of it. I think they're motivated by a different outcome in terms of their interests are to create headlines. It's a very easy, predictable industry. And so I don't think they're doing anything to ruin the carbon space. It's not thoughtful. There are people out there that have misrepresented projects. Just suggesting as a whole, there's a lot of good people out there doing good work. And I just don't like to see my neighbor's brand tarnished when they really are out there trying to make this place better.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we have a system here, the carbon credit market, and it's not perfect. It's new. It takes time to work out the kinks, but jumping ship on this is not the way to go. And we just got to put in checks and balances so that we can make sure that this is a transparent marketplace, and that people can feel confident with the projects they're investing in. And really, a lot of that comes down to the individual organizations and vetting your projects and doing your research and looking at the leadership in place. So it's either your organization's going to do that vetting, or you're going to have to partner with somebody that you can really trust to do that vetting for you.
There are so many things in place, and Natasha, you're completely correct. Like, in order to, I just want to clarify again that, when it comes to creating a carbon credit project or developing a carbon credit project, it certainly it's not a simple thing. And the amount of due diligence and the amount of quantification, validation, verification of the validation, like there's engineering stamps, there's MBAs and PhDs, and not to say that it's just there's checks and balances, yes, but there's also an incredible amount of science that goes behind ensuring that emission reductions are actually reduced or they are actually avoided. And that's the point of the registries. Choosing, I want to circle back to something that Marty said, because there's two of the most interesting phrases that I've had to navigate in my career are, the typical greenwashing and then the green hushing. And it wasn't until, I want to say, about a year ago that I heard green hushing for the first time.
Green hushing, that is a new term, isn't it? So
right?
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah, so we hear it a lot. We hear it a lot in the oil and energy sector, because the first example of greenwashing I ever saw was when a grocery store, instead of using compostable bags, they tinted all their plastic bags green and then, called them the green bag, but it was the same plastic makeup. And so that was such a clear, example of greenwashing. That is using the word green for, to fool the market. And that stuff absolutely needs to be eradicated. But green hushing is where, in my opinion, and I'm going to give my Guardian kind of definition of it, green hushing is when an organization is making steps towards sustainable impact or towards reduced emissions or towards greater ESG goals. And then they're being criticized for not doing enough, or for not doing it right, or for not doing it at the right time or with the right investment. And I think that is such a detrimental kind of phrase, or that's such a detrimental thing happening to the sustainability market, because if an organization, if an organization like Shell is going to be criticized for their emission reduction actions because they're not doing enough, it makes them want to I shouldn't speak for Shell. It's going to encourage them to not want to publicize or talk about any of the projects that they're doing. And then we have less familiarity. Then we have less kind of recognition for the carbon markets. And that's where it gets even cloudier and even more smoke and mirrors. And that's where we need even more transparency. So it is, again, in my potentially naive opinion, that the carbon market will be entirely DAO-based in the future. That is where we are going towards, because the transparency is there. You can follow the emission reduction. You can identify, you can go in and check those equations yourself if you wanted to. You can see who's developing them, who's verified them, who's listing them, who's purchasing them, and for what reason. And I think that following the chain is what is going to provide, some clarity to this market.
Okay. That is a brilliant response. We're going to have to wrap it up soon. So I've got one fun question for you all. Okay. What gets you most excited, and what scares you about moving forward? Marty, do you want to start off with that one?
Sure. Let me start with scared so I can end on excited. I'm scared about the lack of progress in general of iterative improvements to the industry, kind of building off Jana's last comment. It's sort of, there's antibodies in the system that maybe prevents company XYZ from taking a chance. So what scares me is we're trying to de-risk the entire decision-making tree. And excuse my expression, but one of the greatest social media stories a little while ago is fuck around and find out. And this idea that it's okay to experiment in the space of carbon reduction, and I apologize for my language for those listening at home, but it just is my point, is that it's okay to iterate in an experiment. And what gets me excited, I have a team of people that are work with landowners every day. They are carbon curious, which is hope. That means that they don't know what to do, but they're curious about what can they do. And so for that reason, those people listening that have access to finance, spending your money to decouple and help those landowners of any type, Jana's industrial, energy producers, helping them and giving them the tools to employ the technology based on money moves the needle on this thing. And that's what gets me excited, because there's an immense amount of money on the sidelines wants to come. We just need to make it easy.
Natasha, what scares and excites you?
I mean, the reason I got into this company and what truly scares me is that people aren't going to get on board. They're not going to take climate change seriously. I think our future can be really terrifying. Even as somebody who lives on the West Coast in Vancouver, just the last several years, the extreme weather, the flooding, things that I've never seen in my lifetime until the last couple of years. If we don't all get on board and work together, then it's not, and we got to do it quick. It's not gonna be good for any of us. So I guess that's my biggest fear, is that people aren't gonna take the time to understand this and really see what they can do to make an impact. What excites me is, to be honest, the next generation. I have a 14-year-old son. All of his friends, they understand what climate change is. They're on social media, they're loud, they're incredibly tech savvy. They have communities, and they're going to be the ones pushing the older generations to make a change, and they're going to be the ones calling out companies. And I know that we talked about that not always being the most beneficial, but sometimes your feet have to be held to the fire as well. So I feel like really the last year or so it's finally catching fire, and I'm excited for that.
Jana.
Thank you for letting me go last, because I feel like I changed my mind a couple times there just listening to these two. The word scared is probably the wrong word, but the carbon markets is like riding a roller coaster. And so there's so many wins, and then there's so many kind of plummets along the way. And I think what scares me is the organizations or the communities that are kind of going to give up along the way, or that are going to become so much less risk averse, that we lose some of the innovation and some of the push. Natasha had such a great point. Our wonderful Gen Zers are, first of all, doesn't matter. Our wonderful Gen Zers are pushing things forward at a momentum that I feel like we've never seen before, and I don't want to lose this momentum. It's like such a hot time to be in this market, which makes it terrifying and exciting at the same time. But I want it to keep going that way. I want to continue to be terrified and excited. And the exciting part for me is just all the different technologies and the innovations and the individuals that I get to work with on a daily basis, and meeting with people like Natasha and with Marty and building on what each other are doing and creating something faster and cooler and stronger and smarter than what we could have independently.
I think that's a brilliant response from all three of you. And I want to say thank you very much for joining us on this panel. I think we're about to be booted off by the officials. So we'll hand it back to them. But we do have one question, actually, if maybe one of you guys want to answer it. How do you see your businesses fitting into things like TCFD, TNFD, ISSB, and CSSB? So a lot of acronyms there for you.
I don't know what the acronyms all mean, Daniel.
Okay.
So I'm hoping somebody else does. That wins the acronym puzzle for the week for me. I'm sorry, I apologize. I just don't know them. I'm
in the same boat. Sorry, guys.
And you have about 30 seconds.
Okay, well, that wraps
Go
up.
up to Google.
You got to go to ChatGPT. I think that's a wrap. I want to thank, on behalf of all the attendees and the team here at FFCon, Daniel, excellent job. I learned a lot. I think there are, obviously, with anything new, challenges, and carbon markets and all these new terms. Naturally, people are going to have fears, but as Natasha and the panel was mentioning, this next generation is here, and they're going to demand these changes. And maybe 5 years ago, if you had asked me about climate change, I might have had a different response. But today, it is very real, and that's all I will say. But thanks to everybody. We wish you all the best in your business, and kudos to you for being on the front line.